Hello everyone, thanks for coming to this presentation. I'm going to talk about time series job scheduling at Criteo. So how we do it at Criteo. We have our own job scheduler, it's called Cuttle. And so this presentation will be about the general concept about time series job scheduling and a fast 101 on Cuttle. So I will show you the project, how to start with Cuttle, what it can do, and how you can use it in your own company for if you want to schedule a data pipeline the right way. So I'm working in this team, Data Reliability Engineering. This is a team at Criteo. This is the one led by Justin. And what we do, we provide the infrastructure to run analytics workload. So we run services like Hive, Vertica, and we provide the tooling to produce data at scale. So we provide the data scheduler, some optimization framework on top of Scalding and Spark, for example. And we also produce a large chunk of the data at Criteo, at least the analytics data. So we produce some analytics data, the billing data, for example. To give you a bit more context, here are some numbers on the data we produce. So basically, daily, we process around 4 petabytes of data. We produce almost 2 trillion of new data each day. We do that, so that's billing and analytics data. In the team, we are not producing machine learning data. We are producing data set for machine learning, so the machine learning can learn from the data we produce, but we mostly produce analytics and billing data. We do that using several frameworks. They all run on top of MapReduce on our Hadoop cluster. So we either use Hive. So Hive, it's a way to run MapReduce by writing some SQL query. So we are writing some SQL query, and the Hive engine is producing a set of MapReduce jobs for this query. Or we use Scalding. So Scalding is a framework on top of MapReduce. It's done by Twitter, and it allows to express a MapReduce set of job by writing some Scala code, like very geometric Scala code using map, flat map, group by, filter, and so on. And we start using Spark for some workload as well. So we have our own Hadoop cluster. We have a single giant Hadoop cluster, and it runs all our production jobs. The workload on this cluster is like half ETL-like, so this is the part you are responsible for, and half machine learning. And the cluster, the production cluster, is also used for ad hoc analytics investigation by analysts. So that's why we need to invest a lot into optimization, job optimization, because as you see, our cluster is more than full, right? We invest a lot into optimization. But today I'm going to talk mostly about ETL workload. So what we do, it's really very simple. We run ETL data pipeline, and we run it in a time series way. So what I mean by time series, I mean we read some data partition in a time series way, and we produce a new data set partition in the time series way. So for example, the source, the root of all our ETL, that's what we call a GLUP for a ground log unification project. That's all, yeah. So that's basically the log that come from our top-level application everywhere in the world. So they are all pushed into some Kafka topic, and they are stored at the end on our Hadoop cluster in Paris. And they are stored in a time series way because we push our partition. So we wait for 1 hour of data to be complete, and then we close the partition and we wait for the next hour. So we have our partition of raw data. And what we do, so for example, it could be one of the job we have, which is what is a job? We join bid with display. It's producing BI logs, right?
Yeah.
Engine joins, yeah. So basically we have the bid. So all the bid we do on the real-time bidding platform like Google RTB. We have the display we have made, and we need to make the join between both because we have made so many bids. Like we do 100 billion of bid per day, I guess. 200 billion of bid per day, okay. And we win, how much we win?
Well, how many we bid on already? I think we're just paying about 3.5 billion.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, at the end of the hour, we need to do the join between both so we can reconcile both data set and have something more interesting that we call BI log or engine join that is available for creating other data set or for creating some analysis. So we do that basically hourly, and that's what we call time series. And that's interesting because we are working on hour partition, so we can work in parallel. I mean, if 1 hour is late, nothing prevents us to process the next hour, right? Because all hours are totally independent. They are already partitioned, and we can work in parallel. So if we are late, like the cluster was done for 1 day, we still have 24 partitions to produce. We can run the 24 jobs at the same time, right? So it's very interesting to work this way. And we call it time series job scheduling because the scheduler itself knows the time series nature of our data. So we can optimize for this kind of workload. So as many job scheduler, we express the dependencies between all our jobs using a DAG, so a directed acyclic graph. So the DAG, it allows us to express the fact that a job depends of another job. So it can be seen as data-driven, but we can only do it using real job dependencies. So this job must run after this job, and it means it's because these jobs consume some data produced by this other job. So we express all this dependency between jobs using a DAG, and so the scheduler knows how to execute all this job. That's typically how work existing job scheduler like Oozie, Airflow. So we can find a lot of job scheduler in open source working this way. But the problem for us is that the scheduler here it misses some information. We don't have the time series axis. So for example, if this job, the job A, is an hourly job, but this job, the AB, is a daily job, it needs 24 partition, 24 run of this before running, because it's daily and it's dependent of an hourly job. And we want the scheduler to have this information so it can do that automatically for us. We don't have to encode this logic into our job. The scheduler knows that, and it will run the job when the data are ready. We want it to know about time zone, about time offset, about everything related to time series, so it's less logic to encode in our job, actually. So when you look at the DAG this way, you don't really see this time series axis. So the time series is really the idea of filling a calendar. So the calendar is divided in partitions. So you can think about daily partition, but you can drill down and see hourly partition inside the day. And the goal of the scheduler is to run at least once successfully each job for each time partition. So it will try to do that again and again. Sometimes a job will fail, and so it will try again until the job success. And the goal is to have all the calendar green. And as a user, when I want to know how my data are, I just have to look at the calendar, and I can see if there is something red. Red for us, it means that something is stuck. It's not failed, it's stuck, because we will retry again and again until it succeeds. And sometimes something is not completed yet, like this one. Typically, the last day is not yet complete. because you are waiting for some hour in the day to close the day. So this view is not perfect neither, because you don't see the dependency between all the jobs. You just see the time series axis. So we have an alternate view I will show you in Cuttle, and we try to show both axes. So we display a matrix, and so in the x-axis we put the time series, and in the y-axis we put the graph, and we do a topological sort of the graph, so it's linear, and we use it as the axis. So you can see both the dependency between the job and the time series. So you have a matrix to fill with green boxes. So the history of this, Cuttle is the new job scheduler we have, but at the beginning we had basically no job scheduler. It was called Lobster, and Lobster was a kind of a while loop, a bash script. It was a running script actually, a Ruby script, running something in a while loop. So it was running a job, waiting for the job completion, and then running it again. So it means that all the logic about the data dependencies was encoded inside the job. So the job was starting, looking at the dependency, what was ready, is there something new to do? If there is something new, I can launch some job on the cluster, for example, and it shut down, and then it try again. So it works well. I mean, the scheduler is very dumb. It knows nothing about the dependencies, the job, the time series nature of the graph. It knows nothing, but it's kind of working. The only difficult problem to solve with this way of working is backfilling. So backfilling means sometimes we really want to backfill the past. So the past has been completed, but we want to backfill it because, for example, we had some error in the log, or we want to enrich the dataset produced with some new metrics, for example. So we want to compute again what has been already computed. Problem doing that when you have no clear vision of the graph, the dependencies, what has been done, and the time series nature of the graph nowhere, just encoded as a code in a job, it's very difficult to do that. You have to modify your job logic, basically, or to encode a very complex dependency mechanism inside your job logic. Plus, we are a public company, so we have all these SOX rules to fulfill. And so it means that we need a clear audit log of what has been produced, when it has been produced, and everything. So the team created a new kind of scheduler with this real time series and dependencies view built-in in the scheduler. So this one was called Jobber. It was written in Ruby. And so it allows the team to express the dependencies, the time series nature, to have the backfill built in the scheduler. So you could come and say, okay, I want to backfill these 3 days, for example, for this part of the graph. And it was done automatically. And it was way better than before. It was a centralized service. It was a giant job scheduler. And because it was working so well, people started pushing new jobs to the scheduler. And soon, it became a giant graph with thousands of jobs to schedule. And it was really difficult to understand what was happening inside the scheduler. And this is the second very difficult problem we have. This is how to deal with catch-up. So when everything is going well, it's fine. You are waiting for some data to appear. You run the dependencies, and everything is okay. It's very linear, so the scheduling mechanism is very simple to do. But at some point, you need to catch up because, for example, the cluster was down for 2 days during the weekend. So you arrive on Monday morning, and you see that you really want to catch up some part of your graph. So you want to prioritize some part of your graph. Perhaps you want to post something that is not so important. And Jobber was not able to do that, actually. It was really slow to catch up. When something went wrong, we needed a few days to catch up because everything was starting again and it was very slow. So we created a new scheduler. It was called Langoustine. And so Langoustine fixed 2 problems. One was this giant graph. Instead of this giant graph, we choose to create an embed job scheduler. So it's not a service anymore. it's a library you bring in your project. And so we now have several projects. Each team has its own project. You can even have several projects if in your team you manage several data pipelines. So you are responsible for a part of the graph, but only a part. So you can push in production when you want, you can pause when you want. It's way simpler. So it solves this problem. Plus, it has a better scheduling. It still has the backfilling built-in, graph dependencies, everything, but it has a way better scheduling. It is able to parallelize everything with time partition, and we can set limit on the parallelization per job. So we can say this job, you can run it 10 times at once if you want. It's fine. And we can even buffer and run a job for several periods if it's possible. Like you have an export to do to a database, like we use Vertica as reporting database. So eventually we want to export every data into Vertica. And so you have a lot of hour partition to export into Vertica. But because you are late, you have 1 week of data to export. So instead of doing so many hour export, you can do a 1 week export at once because you already have all the data. And it's way better because on the Vertica side, usually the table are partitioned as well, and they are partitioned by week or per month. So Langoustine fixed all that. And so this year, we came up with this new scheduler, which is Cuttle. So Langoustine was actually designed to be deployed on bare metal. So we were deploying scheduler on some physical server. It was a bit painful because when the server physically died, we had to move the project to somewhere else. So now at Criteo, we have a kind of a path. We use Mesos Marathon. So we wanted to deploy our scheduler in Mesos Marathon, but because of the way it was designed, Langoustine, it was not possible. So we fixed that. We tried to improve the UI. We wanted to open source as well. So we wanted to open source Langoustine. A lot of people were asking about can I use Langoustine, but it was really in our internal Moab and not very difficult to extract. So we decided to go open source directly this way this time and to develop in the open on GitHub. So we fixed a lot of design mistakes, simplified the Scala API, better UI, easier to deploy, a new feature like we manage a time zone, time offsets, and it's open source. What are the key principles of Cuttle as a job scheduler? So it's distributed, it's still the same, it's distributed and embedded. So it means that it's a Scala library. You add the library as a dependency to your project, so you create your own data pipeline in your project. You don't have to deploy something somewhere. It's an at least once scheduler, meaning that the scheduler will try to run every job at least once, but it can, in some situations, run it several times. So it means that all jobs have to be idempotent, because in case of failure, like you schedule some job on the Hadoop cluster and you lose the network, I don't know why, and the job complete on Hadoop, but you don't know. So when the network comes back, you don't know what to do, so you schedule it again, right? Because you want really have the job to complete. So it has to be idempotent. The scheduling itself is pluggable, so we try to design the Cuttle with a pluggable scheduler, because even if most of the stuff we do are time series, we know that there is some use cases that are not time series. You can want to have something like cron scheduling, like run something every morning at 9, for example. It's not really time scheduling, this one. It's more cron. Or it can be event-based, like, oh, I receive a new event on a Kafka queue, and I want to run a graph that process, I don't know, an import of a catalog or something. So the scheduler is pluggable, but to be honest, for now, we have only the time series scheduler built in with this project. And we have a better priority management, which was not the case for Langoustine, but the priority management is very clear. You can define how you want to deal with the priority. Like if you have a lot of things to do, what are the most priority, you can decide. Like perhaps it's oldest, but perhaps you have something more important to do, so you can decide that. Okay, so I will do a very, very quick 101 just to show you how the project is designed. So it's a Scala library, right? So you can embed it into any Scala application. So you start your own Scala application. So any Java Scala program is a main. And you basically start by defining some jobs. So a job, like I will start very simply with the hello job. So it has an ID, right? So hello. It has a scheduling. So scheduling here, I have imported the time series scheduler. So I will do some time series scheduling, and I want to configure the job, the scheduling of the job. So I can say, for example, it is an hourly job. So it means that it will run for each hour partition, which is different than running each hour. It won't run each hour, it will run for each hour partition. And it's important because I will put a start date, I think. Started on the 1st of December. And if I launch this workflow right now, I want to run this job, it has to run a lot of times, right? Because it has to run for all the hour partition between the 1st of December until now. And it will run everything in parallel because it is late and it wants to catch up. So it will try to run everything in parallel. Of course, you have some resource management. So you can put other metadata, but basically you have an ID and a scheduling. And the last part is the side effect function. So the side effect function is what will be run by the scheduler, actually. So this is a Scala function. And it is an asynchronous Scala function, so it will return a future. So it can be a very, very long side effect. It can take hours. You can, for example, run something on Hadoop and wait for days for the job to be completed if you want. Or you can poll something, like polling FTP somewhere to try to retrieve a file and to import it, but you are waiting for the file, so it will run 4 days as well. So it's very asynchronous in the way the execution of this function, it can take days. It's totally fine. So it's a future, the result. So the future can be completed or failed. If the future is failed, it means the job failed. So the scheduler will be notified and he will decide what to do. And usually the time series 1 will try to will retry the execution later. It has a retry strategy, so we usually use exponential backoff. So it will wait a bit and retry. And retry and retry again, okay? And here, so in my Scala code, we provide what we call execution platform. And we have this local execution platform built in, which allows me to fork a local process. So I can fork a Python script, I can fork a yarn to send something on Hadoop, I can fork a Hive to run a Hive query. Here I will just fork, I don't know, something like a SH script. And I can put sleep 10. Okay. And so exec itself, it returns the future. Okay. So I can use the return of exec as the return of my side effect job. Meaning if this fork process is a success, the job will be a success. If forking the job is a failure, the job will be a failure. Okay, so this is does it compile? This is a very simple job, okay. And so what is a project, a Cuttle project? So it is a name, like my super project. And it is a graph, a DAG. And the DAG is composed of several jobs. A single job can be a valid DAG, right? A single job, it's just a graph with only one job. So I can use a job as as my workflow definition. And because this is my main, my Scala main function, I will actually run everything. So I will start my project. I can start many projects in my main function if I want. I mean, just a library. So I can start something else. I can just some Scala code. I will start. So it started. It needs a MySQL server, by the way, to store its state. So I have a MySQL server here, so it has been connected automatically. And so it has started, and it's also an HTTP server, so with an UI. So I can connect to the UI. So it's too bad. It has been very, very fast. So I can look here at my calendar. So, okay, so I have a problem with my time zone here because it should have started on the first one here. And I only seen the problem because I'm here. Because I'm in Paris, I guess we are very close to UTC and I never seen the bug. So I have to fix something. But basically it started on the 1st December. So because it's hourly, it has run a job for each partition. So I can open, so partition being green means it's a success. So I can open the partition. I see, why 2 hours ago? Okay, it's the same problem. And I can open the execution. There I have an execution ID. I have my input for my execution, which is, because it's a time series scheduler, the input for my execution is a time series context, so it has a start date and an end date. So the status is success because it was a success, and I can have access to the log. So, okay, I don't know. It should wait 10 seconds, right? No, it's not the. Yeah, it's not the same. It's probably because I already have some state in my SQL server, and yeah, because if I already have some state with another job with ID hello, it probably okay. So this is different. No, here I see in my execution stream I have 10 execution actually running and a lot actually waiting. That's because my execution platform, the local one, it allows me to fork only 10 process at the same time. So I configured that. This is the default. You don't see it because I use the default. But this execution platform allows me to manage the resources. And so, for example, for local, you say, OK, I want to fork 10 process. For Yarn, you say, OK, I want to allocate only, I don't know, 2 petabytes of memory on my container. So you decide. And because of that, a lot of execution are waiting. So for example, if I'm opening this waiting execution, I'm see it tried to fork, but it was waiting for something. Here it's running, so it is probably in the sleep phase, and 10 seconds later it will write lol, and the execution is successful. And here I see that actually it waits for 50 seconds and it runs for 10 seconds, which is expected. So the run is actually the sleep plus the echo, and waiting is because we were so late. We have so many to catch up. Then we have so many jobs running at the same time with a few resources. A lot of execution have to wait. I can open the calendar, and you see the calendar. It makes some progress. So the blue one are running, and the yellow one are waiting. This is my workflow, by the way. So my workflow is a single job. Okay, so let's add a second job. I don't know what to do, but this one will start later. Why not? I will do, I don't know, ls-l. It's world depends on hello. So I'm creating a graph here by combining my job together. So I'm creating a workflow. Saving, it will restart. A few seconds to start. So my workflow is more interesting, you see, okay. Okay, so Kiki is waiting for lol to be completed, so that's why it does some ls, so it doesn't wait for anything, but it waits for its parent to be completed, so it makes some progress this way. And I can open, for example, the result of an execution. And you see I have the result of ls. So the local platform, it is not very interesting. It is the one we have built in with the code on GitHub because it's the easiest to ship. Internally, we have many interesting platforms. One to schedule something on Yarn, on Hadoop, on Spark, schedule some Hive query, do some scoop import to import some data from SQL Server to HDFS, do some FTP export, Vertica export. So we have a lot of stuff, but it's more difficult to open source because we have a lot of dependencies on our own system. So it takes more time to open source them, but I hope we will be able to do it. So it's running. It's pretty close to finish actually. I can try to make an error. So let's do an error, like an option that does not exist. Okay, so this is the lull. Some Kiki will run. So they are waiting this one. Wow. Okay, so it exists. I don't know, I will put like this. We'll make the command fail. Okay, here are some jobs stuck. So they are stuck because an execution has failed. So actually I have one execution which failed here. So okay, I don't know. So this is the failing execution. And so one has been retried. And this one is delayed because the previous one was failing. So it applied a retry strategy. So that's because usually when something fails, it's probably because it's a transient error, like the cluster is down or the cluster has a problem. So if I try to run it again in 5 minutes, it will probably work. And if it doesn't work in 5 minutes, I can wait for 20 minutes and then try again. And if it still doesn't work, I will try in a few hours, and then at some point it will be stuck, and someone will take care of the situation and look at the job where it is failing, so it can fix it if needed. So this one they won't succeed. But if I, for example, I'm fixing my workflow, I'm redeploying. And up, it's done. It's super fast to run actually because it just do LNS. Okay, so that's Cuttle. I have another Cuttle here running at Criteo, so it's the workflow is a bit more interesting. It does some data importing from SQL Server. Then it creates some partition on Hive. It computes some hourly fact. At the end of it does some export to Vertica. Here it does some daily aggregation of the data, and it does another export to Vertica. So that's the typical use case we use a scheduler for at Criteo. Now sometimes you want to have your workflow data driven, and we do that as well. So we have this project called Dataflow, and Dataflow it's a way to create a data pipeline by just writing some Hive query. So user here, they open some project and they create some job, and the job are actually Hive query. So they write some Hive query. And the Dataflow framework, it parses all this Hive query and figure out all the dependencies between all the queries. So for example, if one query produces data by consuming a table produced by another query, it has to be scheduled after, right? Because it has the dependencies. But you don't really express these dependencies. You just write the query, the framework look at the data dependency and configure the Cuttle project automatically. Because Cuttle is just a Scala library. You can automatically create all the code that I written myself by hand. It can be generated, right? I mean, it's not even generated. It just, you can write some code that use the API to create the workflow automatically. And so we have this kind of data-driven project using SQL query. We do it for other, so we had something called Bigorno that we are writing it as EPO to open source it on GitHub as well. And this one allows to do the same as Dataflow, but for Spark and scalding jobs. So you declare your Spark and scalding jobs, but you define what are the input data you need and what are the output data you produce. And then again, the framework will look at all these jobs and figure out all the dependencies and configure the graph itself. So it will create the graph for you. So creating the graph by hand, by focusing on job dependency, is a way to do it. But sometimes you have enough information to create the graph automatically because you want your workflow to be data-driven. If you have enough information on the data you are producing, you can do that automatically. That's all for Cuttle, I guess. And I think I'm out of time. So thank you, and if you have any question. No?